for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've heard today, a nonpartisan, expert, and merit-based civil workforce is essential to delivering the services Americans expect from our government. Our national security depends on it, as do the day-to-day services we rely on, like timely mail, SNAP benefit delivery, and Social Security checks. Our federal agencies can be exceptional if their workers reflect the diverse experiences and demographics of our population. Diversity and inclusion aren't just nice to have, they are a must-have. One of OPM's guiding principles is, and I quote, "When experienced and diverse teams tap their collective knowledge, we get better results." We know that prioritizing DEIA will improve individual and team performance. To get the most from our workforce, every employee should feel welcome. So, Acting Director Shriver, how do you make the case for efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I'm proud of OPM's efforts as an agency, including with respect to promoting DEIA. I think the business case is closed, that in order for organizations to maximize their performance and their effectiveness, they need to pay attention to DEIA. That's why we have emphasized removing barriers to federal employment opportunities by doing things like requiring internships to be paid, by improving pay for blue-collar workers and instituting a $15 an hour minimum wage, by hiring people based on the skills they have and not imposing unnecessary degree requirements, by conducting barrier analyses, by launching the first ever military-connected strategic plan so we can get more military spouses into the government. Those are the actions we're taking, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. And there's plenty of data to back up your claims, Mr. Shriver. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article from Harvard Business Review entitled, "Why Diverse Teams Are Smarter."
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would rather weaken, shrink, and undermine our federal workforce by eliminating diversity of initiatives that bring people with new ideas, backgrounds, and experiences to the table. The Republican nominee for president has made his intention to fire experienced and expert officials in the government with whom he disagrees politically very clear. This is extremely dangerous and would make us all less safe, less secure, and worse off. So, Acting Director Shriver, can you speak to the need for expert, nonpartisan officials in all aspects of the federal workforce, including the agencies maintaining our food safety, our transportation, and even our justice system?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think it's essential for the American people to be able to count on the information that's provided by the federal government, to be able to count on the fact that our political leaders are getting the best advice they can get based on subject matter experts who have experience and expertise in their fields, and that all of us are better as leaders and our government operates more effectively and more efficiently if we can rely on the expert advice of our career civil service.
Thank you so much. This could not be more important as our country faces efforts to politicize the federal workforce rather than strengthen and support the agencies doing life-saving and critical work every day. I just want to personally thank you, Acting Director Shriver, and the Biden-Harris administration for your continued commitment to the best interests of all Americans. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Perry, I believe Mr. Biggs has something to enter into the record.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I ask for, to enter the record a letter that I wrote, signed by many members of this committee in November 2022, and the response in February 2023 by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to begin. The ranking member talked about increasing severity and frequency of storms related to climate change. And while I appreciate he's welcome to his own opinions, however, he's not welcome to his own facts. And a quick search, a very quick search, just shows NOAA saying that there's a downward trend in Atlantic hurricanes in recent decades in severity and frequency. Now, you can continue on down. You can get a number of different opinions: Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, Carbon Brief, NASA, CNN, The American people really don't know exactly what to believe, so they want to multi-source their information, and they should do that, and they should be allowed to do that, and we should be allowed to question the systems without being accused of impugning the federal workforce. I represent many federal workers that get up early in the morning and go to work and believe in their mission and work hard. We're surrounded by federal workers right here that are on their mission and believe in doing the right thing. But that doesn't mean that everything is hunky-dory, and we shouldn't have to be worried about being accused of being against the federal workforce simply by asking reasonable questions about the system. And so with that, sir, I want to go to occupancy and whether OPM has a plan to advocate for releasing unused work space by the federal government over a 3-month average in 2023. Some agencies are barely hitting 25% occupancy. And we have had bills related to that. The Department of Veterans Affairs, 14%. Social Security Administration, 7%. The Office of Personnel Management, 12%. That's the occupancy rate. Now, as long as we're getting the work done, we understand that times are changing, people telework, people working from home, et cetera. We get that. But sometimes the work's not being done. I'm just going to cite an example that I have. I personally called the Federal Aviation Administration about a constituent concern that I have. It's been 3 months. 3 months, and I haven't gotten a response. Now, I don't know if it's because people aren't at work at the office. I don't know it's because they don't care, they don't know, they don't want to answer. I don't know what the answer is. I know I can't get an answer, and neither can my boss or the boss of all the people at the Federal Aviation Administration. So I'm just asking now, based on this, will OPM commit to advocating for the release of these buildings, this infrastructure that we have when the occupancy rates are so low?
Congressman, let me first say, fair points. And these are the issues that we are all wrestling with today, is how the intersection of the work arrangements that are in place now measure up to our footprint.
Well, sir, with all due respect, I appreciate that answer, but we know how it measures up. I just went through some numbers with you. They're not at work at the location. They might be at work somewhere. That has to be yet determined, but they're not at the location. The building's essentially sitting empty. Will you advocate for getting rid of that excess space that's costing the taxpayers money when it's not being used? Will you advocate for that? Will your agency advocate for that?
So I have to defer to GSA generally
Okay,
on
so
that,
you want.
Congressman.
All right, let me move on. I'm concerned about the use of taxpayer money when we're not working, when we're working for a collective bargaining unit. Now, particularly, I'm going to use the VA as an example because many of my constituents count on the VA. They count on them for their care. And when we hire somebody like a physician, a dentist, a podiatrist, a nurse, a chiropractor, an optometrist, we want them to do that work because there's a backlog of individuals waiting. They have to travel in many cases. We want those folks doing that work, yet we see that in many cases, those very individuals are doing work 100% of their time on union organizing or union work. And the past administration said those particular vocations could not be used to do union advocacy or union work, but the new administration not only countermanded that decision, but then went back and paid all those people for that time that had been used in the previous administration. And so now what we have is people, veterans that can't get care because the person, like a nurse or any of the other specialties that I listed, are doing 100% of their time doing union work. Will you support a bill that requires OPM to track the official time used to do non-official work or organized labor work on these locations? Will you advocate or support that legislation?
Congress, I'm happy to take that back and work with your office, but I would like to add that in the 1978 law, Congress compromised and required unions to represent everybody in their bargaining
I get that,
unit,
sir,
whether
but
they pay dues
35
or not.
years ago, 1978, I understand that, but we're talking about now 100% of time used for union activity by people like nurses and physician's assistants and optometrists and doctors. Is that okay with you folks, or will you support a bill that just says, even if it's okay with you, just to track that, just to track it? You shouldn't have to go back to anybody. Will you advocate for tracking the use of that time?
Congressman, again, I'm happy to take that back and to work with your team
Okay,
on.
thank you, Chairman. I yield the balance. I think we got our answer.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Frost from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's important to know that the government is already saving money on the hybrid and telework policies. GSA reports that over $150 million were saved across government agencies in 2022. And so I'm glad that work is already being done right now. An expert, nonpartisan government is the only way government can deliver critical services. My constituents in Central Florida rely on the federal government for their benefits and help keep them safe. Mr. Schreier, if anyone in our federal workforce could be fired for pursuing evidence-based policy implementation and were instead forced to do the partisan bidding of a particular politician, how might that impact the safety of Americans?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I think that kind of system would do a huge disservice to leaders in federal agencies and to the American people. It is critical that federal workers have the protections so that they are able to offer their honest advice, their honest opinions, even when unpopular, or perhaps even when their opinion based on their expertise may be something that the leadership would disagree with. The leaders always have the opportunity to make the decision that they need to make, and then federal employees need to follow and implement it. But it would do great damage to our system and a disservice to the American people, including to safety and national security, if our experts were chilled in their ability to bring their honest analysis to their leadership.
Yeah, I mean, when Donald Trump was president, he proposed the policy that's been brought up, Schedule F, which he's still campaigning on right now, which would have allowed him to replace civil servants with Trump henchmen. And it's dangerous because these goons have no mandate to protect Americans. I mean, last year, Americans suffered over 43,000 gun violence deaths, including 655 mass shootings. Trump's and Republicans in Congress will not take any action to prevent gun violence, and they've even promised to tear apart the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The ATF is the agency responsible for regulating types of gun modifications used in mass shootings and for preventing firearms from being trafficked to those involved in community gun violence. Mr. Shriver, just this past Saturday at an NRA event, Trump reiterated his vow to roll back the Biden administration's gun violence prevention policies and work. As of right now, would civil servants risk losing their jobs if they didn't abandon long-term science-driven projects to carry out Trump's campaign promises?
As of right now, Congressman, as of right now, what is expected of federal employees is that they will bring their expertise, their analysis, their skills to their job every day and offer the best advice that they can to their leadership. That is what is expected of them today. I can't speak to what might be expected of them under a different administration.
Exactly, because Schedule F is not currently law, and our federal workforce is still highly trained, nonpartisan group of dedicated civil servants doing the work. What steps has OPM taken to ensure that the rights and independence of our federal workforce are better protected?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. First of all, I think that we've made clear at OPM that every federal employee is to be valued and treated with dignity and respect. We have worked over the last several years to strengthen the federal workforce through a number of policy initiatives to improve the hiring process, to remove barriers by eliminating unnecessary degree requirements and focusing on skills, and the regulation that you mentioned, the strengthening the civil service protections regulation, which we believe clarifies what the existing rules are under the laws passed by Congress.
In 2020, firearms became the leading cause of death for American children. And then in 2022, homicide emerged as the leading cause of death for pregnant people in the United States. And according to Harvard study, over 10 years, 68% of those homicides involved a gun. The Biden administration created the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I'm worried about what a potential, President Trump would do to these sort of offices, whether taking them apart and removing the evidence-based work that's going on, or installing political goons that don't care about science and evidence-based work that experts know that we need to do. We need a government focused on improving the lives of children, those who are pregnant, everybody else facing the gun violence crisis. And for that, we need an expert, nonpartisan federal workforce vested in the authority to follow science and evidence. Thank you.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Yield the remaining of my time.
Just say a word about what that office is doing, if you would, Mr. Frost, and explain why it would be risky to get rid of it.
Well, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention does a few things, but two I want to highlight is, number one, speeding up implementation of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, money that goes to all of our districts, and number two, working to act as sort of a FEMA to help municipal governments after a shooting happens, which they've helped in Republican districts as well. This is why when a bill came to the floor to defund this office, not only was it was saved in a bipartisan way with 7 Republicans voting to save the office, because they see why this nonpartisan, important office is important to saving the lives of our constituents.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Shriver, for being here. Last Congress, I was pleased to be part of the bipartisan coalition that helped bring about passage of the Postal Service Reform Act. As you know, that legislation requires employees, dependents, and retirees of the Postal Service obtain health insurance coverage through the Postal Service Health Benefit, or PSHB, program by 2025. Is OPM on track to implement the PSHB program by 2025 as required by law?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, we are on track. I have been involved in enough IT projects in my time to say that until it's done, it's not done, but it is our honor to be able to implement this provision for the postal employees, and we look forward to turning on a modern system that can be a model for FEHB reform going forward. So thank you, Congresswoman.
When OPM was last before this committee, I noted that OPM's Inspector General had stated that, quote, "It will be a challenge to stand up the Postal Service Health Benefits Program in such a short time frame while continuing to ensure that sufficient resources are devoted to the continued management of the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program, or FEHB. What has OPM done to address these concerns?"
Thank you, Congresswoman. It is a challenge given the time frame and that the project hasn't been fully funded, and we do appreciate the funding that we got from Congress in '24 and hope to have continued support from Congress in our '25 budget. We have taken several steps to mitigate the risk. Congresswoman, one of the things I'm proudest of is that we do monthly demonstrations of our system that I attend along with our Inspector General. We have been working very closely with our Inspector General throughout the deployment to make sure we are de-risking this as much as possible.
Well, you've emphasized in your other testimony about following the law, so I'm glad that you're focused on following this law, and we will be holding you accountable. It's vital the federal government be held accountable again for providing good service. This includes making sure that the PSHB has numerous plans participating so that postal employees and retirees have as many choices as possible, allowing them to choose the plan that works best for them. How many plans do you expect to participate in PSHB, and how does that compare to FEHB?
We have 32 plans, Congresswoman. We have national plans, local plans. These postal-specific plans are all participating. We fully expect that these plans will get to the finish line and postal employees will have robust choices available to them.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, but I want to ask one that you could talk a lot about, but I want you to be succinct. What lessons learned from FEHB is OPM applying to the PSHB?
We absolutely need a central enrollment platform. That is the key to us being able to administer the postal program in a way that both provides the best customer service and the highest levels of program integrity.
All employers expect employees to perform well and provide good service, and employees should be held accountable for their performance. The federal government should be no different, which is why the Trump administration created Schedule F to allow certain poor-performing federal employees to be held accountable. Since the Biden administration rescinded Schedule F, how does OPM plan to improve employee accountability in the civil service?
Thank you, Congresswoman, and agree with you that federal employees need to be accountable to their performance plans and to the performance of their agencies. We have focused on providing training to managers across governments. We've provided over 300 training courses just last year through our Federal Executive Institute, and we also provided free training to, I believe it was over 10,000 managers and supervisors about thriving in a hybrid work environment that helps them to conduct performance management for teleworkers.
You know, I hate that T word. You train dogs and you educate people. You need to get rid of that. You can spend your life trying to teach people to do things. You train them, they're not learning. They're not learning how to think. I don't know how you're going to help them, help their employees perform better when all you're doing is treating them like trained animals. How does OPM's new rule, which reduces civil service accountability, align with OPM's stated values, including service and excellence?
Our new rule, Congresswoman, simply clarifies the existing rules that have been in place, in some cases going back to the 1950s. It preserves all of the tools that are available to hold federal workers accountable, and we are providing the education to federal leaders to make sure that they are better equipped to use those tools.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to spend some time looking into this accountability issue a little bit more, and I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.
I thank the chair. Mr. Shriver, how many presidential management appointments